It was a cold gray evening in late autumn. The streets were damp from an earlier drizzle, and the air carried a biting chill that made people hurry along with their heads down, eager to escape the weather. Among them was Alex, a young man in his mid-20s who had just finished another long day at work. His hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his worn-out jacket as he trudged home, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of unpaid bills and mounting responsibilities. As Alex turned the corner near the old public library, something caught his eye, a figure sitting slumped on the steps leading up to the building's grand entrance. At first glance, it looked like someone simply resting, but as Alex drew closer, he realized it wasn't laziness keeping this person seated there. It was despair. The figure was a woman, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking slightly. Her coat was thin and threadbare, offering little protection against the biting wind. Beside her lay an open bag, its contents spilling out onto the ground. Papers fluttered in the breeze, and a few crumpled dollar bills peeked out from beneath. A tattered notebook. She seemed oblivious to the world around her, lost in some private storm of emotion. Alex hesitated for a moment. He wasn't sure whether to approach or keep walking. After all, what could he do? He barely had enough money to get by himself, but something about the scene tugged at him, a mix of curiosity and an unshakable feeling that he couldn't walk away without at least checking if she was okay. Taking a deep breath, Alex stepped closer and cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Are you all right?" The woman didn't respond immediately. For a second, Alex wondered if she'd even heard him. Then, slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes were red and swollen, her cheeks streaked with tears. She blinked at him, startled, before quickly looking away. "I'm fine," she muttered, though her voice trembled so much that the words lacked conviction. Alex crouched down beside her, making sure not to invade her space too much. "You don't look fine," he replied honestly. "Is there anything I can do to help?" For a long moment, the woman stared at him as though trying to decide whether he was sincere. Finally, she sighed and shook her head. "No one can help me," she whispered. Her tone was heavy with resignation, the kind of weariness that comes from carrying burdens far too heavy for one person to bear alone. Something about her response struck a chord in Alex. He knew that feeling all too well, the weight of problems that seemed insurmountable, the loneliness of believing no one cared. Maybe it was empathy talking, or maybe it was the memory of times when he had been the one sitting on those metaphorical steps, desperate for someone to notice. Whatever it was, Alex couldn't bring himself to leave. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. "If you want to talk, I'm here." At first, the woman remained silent, her gaze fixed on the wet pavement. But after a while, she began to speak haltingly, her words tumbling out in fragments. She explained that she had recently lost her job and was struggling to make ends meet. That morning, she had gone to the bank only to discover her account was overdrawn. With no family nearby and friends scattered across the country, she felt completely alone. Now she didn't even have enough money to pay for bus fare back to her apartment, or to buy dinner. Hearing her story, Alex felt a pang of sadness. He wanted to offer her hope, to tell her things would get better, but empty platitudes wouldn't solve her immediate problems. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the last $10 bill he had. It wasn't much, barely enough to cover a meal, but it was everything he had left until payday. Without hesitation, he held it out to her. "Here," he said softly. "Take this. Please don't worry about paying me back." The woman's eyes widened in surprise. She stared at the bill as though it might disappear if she blinked. I can't," she stammered, shaking her head. "You need this more than I do." "No, I don't," Alex insisted, pressing the money into her hand. "Trust me, I'll be okay. Just promise me you'll use it to take care of yourself." Tears welled up in her eyes again. But this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Alex smiled faintly, though inside he felt a strange mixture of warmth and unease. On one hand, he was glad he could help. On the other, He couldn't shake the nagging thought that $10 wouldn't fix anything in the long run. Still, he reminded himself that sometimes even the smallest acts of kindness could plant seeds of hope in someone's heart. And maybe, just maybe, that hope would grow into something bigger. As he stood up to leave, the woman called after him. "Wait," she said urgently. "What's your name?" "Alex," he replied, turning back to face her. "And yours?" "Emily," she said, clutching the $10 bill tightly. "I won't forget this, Alex, I promise." With that, Alex nodded and continued on his way, his footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. He tried to push the encounter out of his mind, telling himself it was just a random act of kindness, a fleeting moment in a world full of chaos. But deep down, he couldn't help wondering if their paths would cross again. Little did he know, fate had already begun weaving its threads, setting the stage for a journey neither of them could have anticipated. The days following his encounter with Emily were tough for Alex. He had given away his last $10 without hesitation, but now the reality of his decision began to sink in. His pantry was nearly empty, and payday still felt like an eternity away. For breakfast, he made do with a slice of stale bread. Lunch was skipped altogether. By dinner time, hunger gnawed at him relentlessly, but there wasn't much he could do about it. Alex tried to distract himself by focusing on other things: work, chores, anything that would keep his mind off his growling stomach. But no matter how hard he tried, thoughts of Emily kept creeping back into his head. Had she managed to get home safely? Did the $10 make any real difference in her life? Or had it been nothing more than a temporary bandage over a gaping wound? He told himself not to dwell on it too much. After all, he didn't even know her well enough to worry this much. People faced hardships every day, and while helping someone in need felt good, Alex reminded himself that he couldn't fix everyone's problems. Still, something about Emily's story lingered in his mind, a mix of sadness and resilience that resonated deeply with him. One evening, as Alex stood in line at a small grocery store near his apartment, he struck up a casual conversation with the cashier, an older man named Mr. Harris. They talked about the weather, local news, and eventually, community efforts to help those struggling during the colder months. Mr. Harris mentioned that his daughter volunteered at a downtown shelter, where they provided meals, clothing, and support to people experiencing homelessness or financial hardship. Something about the mention of the shelter sparked an idea in Alex's mind. He remembered Emily sitting on those library steps, looking so defeated yet determined when she spoke about her struggles. Perhaps volunteering at the shelter could give him a chance to feel useful again. More than that, maybe he'd run into Emily or someone else who needed help, and prove to himself that kindness wasn't wasted. With nothing to lose, Alex decided to visit the shelter after work the next day. The building was unassuming from the outside, tucked between two larger structures in a quieter part of town. Inside, however, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Volunteers bustled around, serving hot meals, organizing donated clothes, and chatting warmly with visitors. Despite the challenges many of these individuals faced, there was a sense of camaraderie and hope in the air. Alex approached the coordinator, a kind woman named Sarah, and asked if he could lend a hand. She smiled warmly and handed him an apron. "We're always grateful for extra help," she said. "Just jump in wherever you see a need." For the next few hours, Alex found himself immersed in the rhythm of the shelter. He served food, cleaned tables, and helped sort through donations. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. As the evening wore on, Alex noticed a familiar face across the room. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but as the person turned toward him, he realized it was Emily. She looked different now, not entirely transformed, but there was a lightness in her expression that hadn't been there before. She was assisting another volunteer, handing out blankets and warm drinks to visitors. When their eyes met, recognition flashed across her face. For a moment, neither of them moved, both caught off guard by the unexpected reunion. Then Emily rushed over and threw her arms around him in a tight hug. "I've been looking for you," she exclaimed, her voice thick with emotion. Alex froze, unsure how to respond. He hadn't expected her to remember him. let alone go out of her way to find him. I didn't think you'd recognize me, he admitted once she pulled away. How have you been? Emily's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. Better, she said. That night you helped me. It meant more than I can put into words. You gave me hope when I didn't think there was any left. I reached out to some friends and they helped me get back on my feet. Now I volunteer here whenever I can. I want to pay forward the kindness you showed me. Her words hit Alex like a wave. He hadn't realized the impact his small gesture had made. All he'd done was hand over a crumpled $10 bill, yet it seemed to have set off a chain reaction that changed Emily's life, and perhaps his own. Over the next few weeks, Alex and Emily grew closer. They spent hours talking about their lives, sharing stories of struggle and perseverance. Emily explained how losing her job had sent her spiraling into despair, but meeting Alex had reignited her determination to turn things around. With the support of friends and family, she had found temporary work and was slowly rebuilding her confidence. In turn, Alex opened up about his own battles, the constant pressure of living paycheck to paycheck, the loneliness of feeling invisible in a crowded city, and the quiet fear that he might never amount to anything meaningful. Listening to each other, they discovered a shared understanding, a bond forged through vulnerability and mutual respect. Through Emily, Alex also met others at the shelter, people from all walks of life who had faced unimaginable challenges but refused to give up. There was Maria, a single mother juggling 3 jobs to provide for her children, James, a veteran struggling to adjust to civilian life, and Carlos, a teenager trying to finish high school despite unstable housing. Each person had a unique story, yet they all carried the same spark of resilience. As Alex continued volunteering, he began to notice subtle changes within himself. The weight of his own struggles didn't disappear, but it became easier to carry when he focused on helping others. He learned valuable lessons about empathy, patience, and the power of community. Most importantly, he realized that kindness wasn't just about giving money or resources. It was about showing up, listening, and letting people know they weren't alone. One afternoon, Sarah, the shelter coordinator, pulled Alex aside after his shift. "You've been doing great work here," she said with a warm smile. "Have you ever considered making this kind of thing your career?" Alex blinked in surprise. "Me? No, I don't have the qualifications for something like that." Sarah shook her head. "It's not always about degrees or experience. Sometimes it's about heart. You connect with people in a way that makes them feel seen and valued. That's rare, and it's exactly what we need more of." Her words stayed with Alex long after he left the shelter that evening. Could he really pursue a path like this? The idea seemed daunting, almost impossible. Yet deep down, a tiny seed of possibility began to take root. Maybe fate had brought him to that library step for a reason, to remind him that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways he couldn't predict. Little did Alex know his journey was only beginning. As the weeks turned into months, Alex found himself spending more and more time at the shelter. What had started as a way to distract himself from his own struggles had become something much deeper, a calling that gave his life meaning. He wasn't just volunteering anymore. He was building relationships, learning new skills, and discovering parts of himself he hadn't known existed. Sarah, the shelter coordinator, noticed how dedicated Alex was. She often joked that he worked harder than some of the full-time staff, but beneath her teasing tone lay genuine admiration. One day, after a particularly busy shift, she pulled him aside again. This time, however, her expression was serious. "Alex," she began, "there's an opportunity I think you should consider. A local nonprofit organization is hiring part-time outreach coordinators. They're looking for someone who can connect with people in need, someone empathetic, resourceful, and willing to go the extra mile." Alex frowned, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. "Wait, you're suggesting me for this job?" "Yes, exactly," Sarah replied without hesitation. "You've already proven you have what it takes. You listen, you care, and you make things happen. Plus, your experience here gives you a solid foundation. Why not apply? The idea felt surreal. Alex had never imagined himself in a role like that. Growing up, he'd always been told he wasn't qualified enough for anything beyond manual labor or low-paying jobs. The thought of applying for a position at a nonprofit seemed laughable, even presumptuous. Yet Sarah's confidence in him planted a seed of doubt about his own limitations. "I don't know," Alex said hesitantly. "I mean, I appreciate the suggestion, but do you really think they'd hire someone like me?" Sarah placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes people are qualified because of who they are, not what they've done. Trust me, Alex, you've got what it takes. And if you're worried about the application process, I'll help you every step of the way." Her words lingered in Alex's mind long after their conversation ended. That night, as he sat alone in his tiny apartment, he wrestled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, fear whispered that he was setting himself up for disappointment, that no matter how hard he tried, doors would remain closed to someone like him. On the other hand, hope nudged him forward, reminding him of how far he'd come since that fateful evening outside the library. Finally, Alex made up his mind. If nothing else, applying for the job would be a chance to prove to himself that he could try, to take a leap of faith even if failure loomed on the horizon. With Sarah's guidance, he spent the next few days crafting his resume and writing a heartfelt cover letter. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, an authentic reflection of his journey and aspirations. To his astonishment, the nonprofit invited him for an interview. Nervous but determined, Alex prepared meticulously, practicing answers to potential questions and rehearsing his story until he could tell it confidently. When the day arrived, he walked into the office feeling like an imposter, but also like someone ready to fight for a better future. The interview went better than he expected. The panel asked thoughtful questions, and Alex responded candidly, sharing both his strengths and his vulnerabilities. He spoke about his experiences at the shelter, his passion for helping others, and his belief in the transformative power of kindness. By the end of the meeting, he felt a sense of accomplishment regardless of the outcome. He had faced his fears head-on. A week later, Alex received the call he never thought possible. He got the job. Starting as an outreach coordinator was daunting, to say the least. The role came with responsibilities Alex had never anticipated, from coordinating resources for clients to networking with partner organizations. There were days when he doubted his abilities, when the weight of others' struggles threatened to overwhelm him. But through it all, he leaned on the support system he'd built at the shelter. Emily became his closest confidant during this period. She celebrated his successes and offered comfort when setbacks arose. "You're doing amazing work," she would remind him whenever self-doubt crept in. "Don't forget why you started this." Meanwhile, Alex continued mentoring teenagers at the shelter, teaching them practical skills like budgeting, resume writing, and interview preparation. Many of these young people reminded him of his younger self, lost, scared, and unsure of their place in the world. Seeing their progress filled him with pride and reinforced his belief that everyone deserved a chance to thrive. One of the teens, a shy boy named Marcus, stood out to Alex in particular. Marcus had dropped out of high school and struggled to find stable employment. Through consistent encouragement and guidance, Alex helped him enroll in a GED program and secure a part-time job at a local cafe. Watching Marcus light up with newfound confidence was one of the most rewarding moments of Alex's life. Despite his growing responsibilities, Alex remained grounded. He knew he wasn't saving the world single-handedly, but he believed that every small victory mattered. Whether it was helping someone fill out paperwork, connecting a family with affordable housing options, or simply lending an ear to someone in distress, each action contributed to a larger ripple effect. However, not everything was smooth sailing. As Alex delved deeper into his new role, he encountered challenges that tested his resolve. Some clients grew frustrated when solutions weren't immediate, while others dismissed his efforts altogether. Skeptics within the nonprofit questioned whether someone without formal qualifications could truly handle the demands of the job. Even Alex himself sometimes wondered if he was cut out for this line of work. During one particularly difficult week, Alex confided in Emily about his doubts. "What if I'm not good enough?" he admitted. "What if I let everyone down?" Emily listened patiently before responding. "Do you remember why you started doing this? You helped me when you had nothing to gain. You gave selflessly because it was the right thing to do. Don't lose sight of that now." Her words struck a chord in Alex. He realized that growth often came through struggle, and setbacks were opportunities to learn and adapt. Slowly but surely, he regained his footing, drawing strength from his support network and the countless individuals whose lives intersected with his. Through it all, Alex clung to the lesson he'd learned that fateful night outside the library. Compassion has a ripple effect. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, could set off a chain reaction that transformed lives, including his own. By the end of his first year as an outreach coordinator, Alex had accomplished more than he ever dreamed possible. He had connected dozens of families with essential resources, organized community workshops, and forged partnerships with local businesses. His work earned recognition not only within the nonprofit, but also among the broader community. Yet, despite his achievements, Alex remained humble. He knew his journey was far from over. Challenges would continue to arise, and there would always be more work to do. But for the first time in his life, he woke up each morning excited about the day ahead, not because of accolades or titles, but because he felt he was making a difference. Looking back, Alex marveled at how far he'd come since that chilly autumn evening. What started as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a career that fulfilled him in ways he couldn't have imagined. And though he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, he faced it with renewed determination, grateful for the strangers who had become friends, the struggles that had shaped him, and the reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could create waves of change. In the end, Alex realized that life wasn't about grand gestures or heroic feats. It was about showing up, being present, and choosing to care, even when it seemed impossible. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment of generosity to alter the course of a lifetime. As Alex settled deeper into his role as an outreach coordinator, he began to realize that the path of helping others was not a straight line. It was more like climbing a mountain with steep slopes, jagged rocks, and sudden storms. While the work brought immense satisfaction, it also came with its share of challenges that tested his patience, resilience, and faith in himself. One of the hardest parts of the job was dealing with setbacks. No matter how hard Alex worked, there were times when things simply didn't go according to plan. A client he had spent weeks assisting would suddenly disappear without explanation. A family he had connected with temporary housing would end up back on the streets due to unforeseen circumstances. These moments left him feeling defeated, questioning whether his efforts truly made any difference at all. There were also critics, people who doubted his abilities because of his unconventional background. Some colleagues whispered behind his back, wondering aloud if someone without formal education or experience could handle the complexities of social work. Others openly questioned his decisions, pointing out flaws in programs he had helped organize. At first, their words stung deeply, planting seeds of insecurity in his mind. Was he truly qualified for this role? Had he been fooling himself into thinking he belonged here? During one particularly rough week, everything seemed to go wrong. A grant proposal he had poured hours into writing was rejected, leaving a key initiative underfunded. A workshop he had planned months in advance fell apart when several participants failed to show up. To top it off, a client accused him of being out of touch with their struggles during a heated argument. Exhausted and disheartened, Alex found himself sitting alone in his office late one evening, staring blankly at his desk. It was then that Emily walked in. She had stopped by the nonprofit earlier to drop off donations and noticed Alex's car still parked outside. Concerned, she decided to check on him. "Hey," she said softly, stepping inside. "What are you still doing here?" Alex looked up, startled. "Oh, hey, Emily. I guess I lost track of time." She studied his face carefully, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. "You look like you've had a rough day," he sighed, leaning back in his chair. More like a rough week, maybe a rough month. Emily pulled up a chair and sat down across from him. Want to talk about it? For a moment, Alex hesitated. He didn't want to burden her with his problems. They weren't nearly as dire as the ones she had faced when they first met. But something about her calm presence made him open up. I just feel like I'm failing, he admitted. Every time I think I'm making progress, something happens to remind me how little control I actually have. And then there are people who don't believe I'm cut out for this job. Sometimes I wonder if they're right. Emily listened quietly, letting him vent. When he finished, she leaned forward slightly. Do you remember why you started doing this? She asked gently. You helped me when you had nothing to gain. You gave selflessly because it was the right thing to do. Don't lose sight of that now. Her words hit home. Alex realized that somewhere along the way, he had become so focused on external validation, on proving himself to others, that he had forgotten the heart of what drove him in the first place. It wasn't about titles, qualifications, or even results. It was about showing up, listening, and caring, even when it felt impossible. Determined to refocus, Alex threw himself back into his work with renewed energy. He reminded himself that growth often came through struggle, and setbacks were opportunities to learn and adapt. Slowly but surely, he began to find his footing again. One of the biggest lessons he learned was the importance of collaboration. Instead of trying to shoulder every responsibility alone, Alex reached out to his colleagues for support. Together, they brainstormed solutions to common challenges, shared resources, and celebrated each other's successes. Through these interactions, Alex discovered that teamwork wasn't just about dividing tasks. It was about building trust and creating a sense of community. Another turning point came when Alex attended a regional conference for outreach workers. The event brought together professionals from various organizations, all working toward similar goals. For the first time, Alex saw firsthand the broader impact of his efforts. Listening to stories from seasoned veterans in the field inspired him to keep pushing forward, even when the road ahead seemed uncertain. At the conference, Alex also met a mentor named Rachel, a veteran social worker known for her innovative approaches to community engagement. After hearing Alex speak during a panel discussion, Rachel approached him with encouraging words. You have a unique perspective, she told him. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Your experiences give you insight that formal training can't always provide. Rachel's confidence in him reinforced what Sarah and Emily had been saying all along. Alex's value lay not in his credentials, but in his authenticity. He might not have degrees or certifications, but he understood hardship in a way few others did, and that understanding allowed him to connect with people on a deeper level. Back at the nonprofit, Alex began implementing new strategies based on what he had learned at the conference. One idea involved partnering with local businesses to create internship opportunities for teenagers transitioning out of foster care. Another focused on organizing monthly support groups where clients could share their experiences and build connections. These initiatives required extra effort, but the results spoke for themselves. Clients reported feeling more empowered, and partnerships flourished as word spread about the nonprofit's success. Through it all, Alex continued mentoring teenagers at the shelter, including Marcus, who had become a close friend. Watching Marcus grow from a shy, insecure boy into a confident young man filled Alex with pride. When Marcus graduated from the GED program and landed a full-time job, he invited Alex to celebrate with his family. You changed my life, Marcus said during the celebration, raising a glass in Alex's honor. I'll never forget what you've done for me. Alex smiled, though his eyes glistened with tears. No, Marcus, you did the hard work. I just pointed you in the right direction. Moments like these reminded Alex why he had chosen this path. Success wasn't measured by awards or recognition. It was measured by the lives touched and transformed. Each small victory, no matter how insignificant it might seem, added up to something greater. As the years passed, Alex's reputation grew within the nonprofit sector. His dedication earned him promotions, and he eventually became the head of outreach operations. Yet, despite his achievements, he remained grounded. He knew his journey was far from over. Challenges would continue to arise, and there would always be more work to do. But for the first time in his life, Alex felt truly fulfilled. Not because of titles or accolades, but because he believed he was making a difference. Looking back, Alex marveled at how far he'd come since that chilly autumn evening outside the library. What started as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a career that gave his life purpose. And though he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, he faced it with renewed determination, grateful for the strangers who had become friends, the struggles that had shaped him, and the reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could create waves of change. In the end, Alex realized that life wasn't about grand gestures or heroic feats. It was about showing up, being present, and choosing to care, even when it seemed impossible. Because sometimes all it takes is one moment of generosity to alter the course of a lifetime. Years had passed since Alex first handed over that crumpled $10 bill to Emily outside the library. The memory of that moment still lingered in his mind, though it now felt like a distant chapter in a much larger story. What began as a fleeting act of kindness had grown into something far greater, a journey of transformation not just for Alex, but for countless others whose lives he touched along the way. On a crisp autumn evening, fittingly similar to the one where it all began, Alex stood on stage at a community center packed with people. The room buzzed with conversation and laughter, the hum occasionally interrupted by bursts of applause as award recipients were announced. Tonight was special. It marked the annual recognition ceremony for local leaders who had made significant contributions to their communities. And Alex, dressed in a modest suit borrowed from Marcus, who insisted it looked better on him anyway, was among those being honored. As his name echoed through the microphone, Alex stepped forward to accept the award, a simple plaque engraved with words that seemed too grand for someone like him: Outstanding Community Leader. He smiled nervously, scanning the crowd. His eyes landed on familiar faces scattered throughout the audience. Emily, sitting near the front with tears glistening in her eyes. Sarah, clapping enthusiastically while mouthing, "I told you so." Marcus, grinning ear to ear and giving him 2 thumbs up. And even Mr. Harris, the grocery store cashier who had unknowingly planted the seed for this entire journey years ago. Taking a deep breath, Alex adjusted the microphone and began to speak. "When I heard I'd be receiving this award," he started, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "the first thing I thought was, are they sure they got the right guy?" The crowd chuckled, but Alex's expression remained serious. "Because honestly, I'm just someone who stumbled into doing what felt right. Not because I had some grand plan or noble intentions, but because I couldn't walk away when someone needed help." He paused, glancing down at the plaque in his hands before continuing. "This journey started with a single decision: to give my last $10 to a stranger sitting on library steps. At the time, it didn't feel like much, just a small gesture, something anyone could do. But looking back, I realized that moment changed everything, not just for her, but for me too." Alex went on to share snippets of his story: how volunteering at the shelter introduced him to a world of resilience and hope, how mentors like Sarah and Rachel believed in him when he doubted himself, and how teenagers like Marcus reminded him why every effort mattered. He spoke about the challenges, the sleepless nights, the setbacks, the moments of self-doubt, and how each struggle taught him lessons he wouldn't trade for anything. "But here's the thing," he said, leaning closer to the mic. "Kindness isn't about solving every problem or fixing everything overnight. It's about planting seeds. You might never see them grow, but trust me, they do. That $10 I gave to Emily, it helped her get back on her feet, sure. But more importantly, it showed her she wasn't alone. And guess what? She turned around and paid it forward, volunteering at the same shelter where we reconnected. Now look at her. She's helping dozens of people find their footing just like she did." Emily wiped her eyes as the audience erupted into applause. Alex smiled warmly at her before turning back to the crowd. "That's the power of kindness. It creates ripples. One act inspires another, and another, until suddenly, you're standing in a room full of people who've been touched by those ripples. People who remind you that no matter how tough things get, there's always hope." After the ceremony, the celebration spilled out into the lobby, where tables laden with food awaited guests. Alex mingled with well-wishers, shaking hands and exchanging hugs, but his attention kept drifting toward Emily. Finally, catching her eye across the room, he excused himself and made his way over. "You were amazing up there," Emily said, pulling him into a tight embrace. "I'm so proud of you." "Thank you," Alex replied, his voice thick with gratitude. "But really none of this would have happened without you. Remembering that night reminds me how interconnected we all are. Your courage inspired me to keep going, even when I felt lost." Emily shook her head, smiling softly. "Don't sell yourself short. You're the one who saw potential in me when I couldn't see it myself. And now look at us. Here we are, years later, still making a difference together." They stood quietly for a moment, reflecting on how far they'd come, from strangers brought together by chance to friends bound by shared experiences. Their lives had intertwined in ways neither could have predicted. They weren't perfect, far from it, but they had learned that imperfection was part of the process. Growth came not from avoiding mistakes, but from embracing them, learning and moving forward. Later that night, as the festivities wound down, Alex found himself alone on the balcony overlooking the city skyline. Lights twinkled in the distance, casting a warm glow over the bustling streets below. For once, he allowed himself to bask in the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had made an impact, not because of awards or titles, but because he had chosen to care. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" It was Marcus, holding 2 cups of coffee. Alex grinned and gestured for him to sit. "Thought you'd be celebrating inside with everyone else." Marcus shrugged, handing him a cup. "Nah, figured you might need a break from all the attention. Besides, I wanted to say thanks again for everything." Alex sipped his coffee, warmth spreading through him both physically and emotionally. "You don't have to thank me, Marcus. You've already paid it forward tenfold. Look at how many kids you're mentoring now." Marcus laughed sheepishly. "Yeah, well, I learned from the best. Speaking of which," he hesitated, then added, "Do you ever wonder if we'll inspire someone else the way you inspired us? Like maybe one day, one of those kids will stand on a stage like this and talk about how someone believed in them when they didn't believe in themselves?" Alex nodded slowly, a smile tugging at his lips. "I think about that a lot, actually. It's funny. When I started this journey, I never imagined it leading here, but now I can't imagine doing anything else. Because every person we touch has the potential to create their own ripple. And who knows how far those ripples will go." The two sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker against the dark sky. In that moment, Alex realized something profound. Life wasn't about reaching a destination or achieving perfection. It was about connection, the bonds we form, the stories we share, and the love we give freely, without expecting anything in return. As he glanced at Marcus, beside him, then thought of Emily, Sarah, and all the others who had walked alongside him, Alex felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had started with nothing more than a desire to help someone in need. Yet somehow, that single act of kindness had sparked a chain reaction, touching lives in ways he could never have foreseen. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. That even the smallest gestures carried infinite possibilities. A kind word, a listening ear, a helping hand. Each one had the power to change the course of a lifetime. Not just for the person receiving it, but for the giver too. As Alex finally left the balcony and rejoined the celebration inside, he carried with him a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, new uncertainties. But armed with the knowledge that compassion created ripples, Alex faced the future with unwavering hope. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment of generosity to alter the course of a lifetime. And Alex knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he had done exactly that, not once but countless times over.